Part 1 of Chapter 2 of How to Analyze People on Sight. This is a LibreVoice recording. All LibreVoice recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibreVoice.org. How to Analyze People on Sight through the Science of Human Analysis. The 5 Human Types by Elsie Lincoln Benedict and Ralph Paine Benedict. Section 5 of Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The Thoracic Type. The Thriller. Individuals in whom the circulatory system, heart, arteries and blood vessels, and the respiratory system, lungs, nose, and chest are more highly developed than any other systems, have been named the thoracics. This name comes from the fact that the heart and lungs, which constitute the most important organs of these two closely allied systems, are housed in the thorax, that little room made by your ribs for the protection of these vital organs. Physical resilience. A general elasticity of structure, a suggestion of sinews and physical resilience characterize this type. The florid-faced, high-chested individual. What is known as a red face, when accompanied by a high chest, always signifies large thoracic tendencies. The high color which in an adult comes and goes is a sure indication of a well-developed circulatory system, since high color is caused by the rapid pumping of blood to the tiny blood vessels of the face. People with little blood, weak hearts or deficient circulation are not florid and must be much overheated or excited to show vivid color in their cheeks, betray their feelings. On the other hand, the slightest displeasure, enjoyment, surprise or exertion brings the blood rushing to the face and neck of him who has a large, well-developed blood system. How many times you have heard such a one say, "I am so embarrassed, I flush at every little thing. How I envy the rest of you who come in from a long walk looking so cool." The man of great chest expansion. The largest part of this man's body is around the chest. See Chart 3. His chest is high for the reason that he has larger lungs than the average. Advantages of a high chest. The man of unusual chest expansion has one great physical asset. The person who breathes deeply has a decided advantage over the man who breathes deficiently. The lungs form the bellows or air supply for the body's engine, the heart, and with a deficient supply of air, the heart does deficient work. Efficient breathing is easy only to the man of large lungs, and only the high-chested have large lungs. Long-waisted people. A long waist is another thoracic sign, for it is a natural result of the extra houseroom required by the large lungs and heart. It is easily detected in both men and women. See Chart 3. If you are a close observer, you have noticed that some people appear to have a waistline much lower than others, that the belt line dividing the upper part of the body from the lower is proportionately much nearer to the floor in some than in others of the same height. Passing of the warp's waist. The strict up and down lines of today's woman and the flimsy shoulder-to-heel garments she wears have obliterated her waistline. But you will recall how differently the old warp's waist fashions of a score of years ago betrayed the secrets of the short and long waist. The 18-inch belt, of which we were so falsely proud in 1900, told unmistakable facts about milady's thoracic development. Belt versus suspenders. As the telltale belt disappeared from women's wardrobe, it appeared in men's, and now betrayed the location of his waist with an exactness of which the old-fashioned suspenders were never guilty. To test yourself. If you are a man and have difficulty in getting ready-made coats long enough for you, that is certain proof that you have decided thoracic tendencies. If you are a woman who has to forgo many a pretty gown because it is not long enough in the waist, the same is true of you. In women, this long waist and high chest give the appearance of small hips and of shoulders a little broader than the average. In men, it gives that strict, soldier-like bearing which makes this type of man admired and gazed after as he strides down the street. The pure thoracic head. A high head is a significant characteristic of the typical thoracics. See Chart 4. The Anglo-Saxons tend to have this head and, more than any other races, exhibit thoracic qualities as racial characteristics. This is considered the handsomest head known. Certainly it lends the appearance of nobility and intelligence. It is not wide, looked at from the front or back, but inclines to be slightly narrower for its height than the Alimentive head. The kite-shaped face. A face widest through the cheekbones and tapering slightly up the sides of the forehead and downward to the jawbones is the face of the pure thoracic. See Chart 4. This must not be mistaken for the pointed chin nor the pointed head, but is merely a sloping of the face upward and downward from the cheekbones, as a result of the unusual width of the nose section. See Chart 4. His well-developed nose. The nose section is also high and wide because the typical thoracic has a nose that is well developed. This is shown not only by its length but by its high bridge. The cause for the width and length of this section is obvious. The nose constitutes the entrance and exit departments of the breathing system. Large lung capacity necessitates a large chamber for the intake and expulsion of air. Signs of good lungs. Whenever you see a man whose face is wide through the cheekbones, with a long high-bridged open nostril nose, you see a man of good lung capacity and of quick physical energy. When you see anyone with pinched nostril, a face that is narrow through the cheekbones with a low or sway back nose, you see a man whose lung capacity is deficient. Such a person invariably expends his physical energy more slowly. Freckles, being due to the same causes as wet hair and high color, are further indication of thoracic tendencies, though you may belong to this type with or without them. The typical thoracic hand. The pointed hand is the hand of the pure thoracic. See Chart 4. Note the extreme length of the second finger and the pointed effect of this hand when all the fingers are laid together. Any person with a pointed hand such as this has good thoracic development, whether it occupies first place in his makeup or not. The fingers of the thoracic are also inclined to be more thin-skinned than those of other types. One may be predominantly thoracic without these elements, but they are indication of the extreme thoracic type. Naturally, the hand of the extreme thoracic is more pink than the average. The beautiful foot. The thoracic tends to have more narrow, high-arched feet than other types. As a result, this type makes the majority of the beautifully short. The man of energetic movements. A hair-trigger nimbleness goes with this type. He is always posed ready to strike. All thoracics use their hands, arms, wrists, limbs, and feet alertly and energetically. They open doors, handle implements, and all kinds of hand instruments with little blundering. Also their movements are more graceful than those of other types. The thoracic walk. The springy step must have been invented to describe the walk of the thoracic. No matter how hurried, his walk has more grace than the walk of other types. He does not stumble, and it is seldom that a thoracic steps on the chain of his partner's groan. The graceful sitter. The way you sit tells a great deal about your nature. One of the first secrets it betrays is whether you are by nature graceful or ungainly. The person who sits gracefully, who seems to drop himself becomingly upon a chair and to arise from it with ease, is usually a Thoracic. The excess of energy sometimes gives them the appearance of fidgeting, but it is an easy, graceful fidget and not as disturbing as that of other types. Keen eye and ear senses. Quick eye and keen ears are characteristics of the Thoracics. The millions of stimuli, the sounds, sights, and smells impinging every waking moment upon the human consciousness, affect him more quickly and more intensely than any other type. The acuteness of all our senses depends, to a far greater extent than we have hitherto supposed, upon proper heart and lung action. Take long deep breaths for 5 minutes in the open air, while walking rapidly enough to make your heart pound, and see how much keener your senses are at the end of that time. The Thoracic is chronically in this condition because his heart and lungs are going at top speed habitually and naturally all his life. Susceptible to heat. Because bodily temperature varies according to the amount of blood and the rapidity of its circulation, this type is always warmer than others. He is extremely susceptible to heat, suffers keenly in warm rooms or warm weather, and wears fewer wraps in winter. The majority of the bathers at the beaches in summer are largely of this type. The high-strung, nerves as dull as a violin string due to his acute physical senses and his thin sensitive skin, plus his instantaneous quickness, make the Thoracic what is known as high-strung. The most temperamental. Because he is keyed to high C by nature, the Thoracic has more of that quality called temperament than any other type. The wag who said that temperament was mostly temper might have reversed it and still have been right. For temper is largely a matter of temperament. Since the Thoracic have more temperament, it follows naturally that they have more temper, or rather that they show it oftener, just as they show their delightful qualities oftener. A continuous performance. This type, consciously and unconsciously, is a continuous performance. He is showing you something of himself every moment, and if you are interested in human nature, as your reading of this book suggests, you are going to find him a fascinating subject. He is expressing his feelings with more or less abandon all the time, and he is likely to express as many as a dozen different ones in as many moments. The quick temper. Flying off the handle and going up in the air are phrases originally inspired by our dear delightful friends, the Thoracic. Other types do these more or less temperamental things, but they do not do that as frequently nor on as short notice as this type. The human firefly. A fiery nature is part and parcel of the Thoracic make-up. But did you ever see a fiery natured man who didn't have lots of warm friends? It is the grouch, in whom the fire starts slowly and smolders indefinitely, that nobody likes. But the man who flares up, flame for a moment and is calm the next, never lacks for companion or devotees. The red-haired. One may belong to the Thoracic type, whether his hair is blonde or brunette or any of the shades between. But it is an interesting fact that most of the red-haired are largely of this type. "He didn't have red hair for nothing" is a famous phrase that has been applied to the red-haired, quick-tempered Thoracic for generations. You will be interested to note that this high color and high chest are distinctly noticeable in most of the red-haired people you know, certain proof that they approximate this type. As you walk down the street tomorrow, look at the people ahead of you, and when you find a red-haired, notice how much more red his neck is than the necks of the people walking beside him. This flushed skin almost always accompanies red hair, showing that most red-haired people belong to this type. The flash in the pan. The red-haired man's temper usually expends itself instantly. His red-hot fierceness is over in a moment. But for every enemy he has two friends. Friends who like his flame, even though in constant danger from it themselves. Whereas the Alimentive avoids you if he disagrees with you, the Thoracic likes to tell you in a few hot words just what he thinks of you. But the chances are that he will be so completely over it by lunchtime that he will invite you out with him. Desire for approbation. To be admired and a wee bit envied are desires dear to the heart of this type. Everybody, to a larger or lesser degree, desires these things, but to no other type do they mean so much to this one. We know this because no other type, in any such numbers, takes the trouble or makes the sacrifice necessary to bring them about. S indicate desires. The ego of every individual craves approval, but the majority of the other types craves something else more. The particular something in each case depending upon the type to which the individual belongs. You can always tell what any individual wants most by what he does. The man who thinks he wants a thing or wishes he wants it talks about getting it, envies those who has it, and plans to start doing something about it. But the man who really wants a thing goes after it, sacrifices his leisure, his pleasures, and sometimes loves himself and gets it. Shines in public life. The limelight appeals more to this type than to others, because it goes further toward gratifying his desire for approbation. So while other men and women are dreaming of fame, the Thoracic practices, plods, and pleads his way to it. The personal agitation of friends and of the multitude is the breath of life to him. Extremes of this type consider no self-denial too great a price to pay for it. Many on the stage. The stage in all its forms is as natural a field to the Thoracic as salesmanship is to the Alimentive. The pleas of fond papas and fearsome mamas are usually ineffective with this type of boy or girl when he sets his heart on a career before the footlights or in the movies. Whether they achieve it or not will depend on other and chiefly mental traits in each individual's make-up. But the yearning for it in some form is always there. So the managers' waiting rooms are always crowded with people of this type. It is this intensity of desire which has goaded and inspired most stage artists on to success in their chosen fields. Put yourself in his place. To be able to put one's self in the role of another, to feel as he feels, to be so keenly sensitive to his situation and psychology that one almost becomes that person for the time being, is the heart and soul of acting. The Thoracic has this sensitiveness naturally. After long study and acquaintance, you may be able to put yourself in the place of a few friends. The Thoracic does this instantly and automatically. Tendency, not toil, makes fame. Those who have succeeded to fame in any given line are wont to proclaim hard work is the secret of success, and to take great credit unto themselves for the labor they have expended on their own. It is true of course that all success entails hard work, but the man or woman sufficiently gifted to rise to the heights gets from that gift such a strong inward urge towards its expression that what he does in that direction is not work to him. The long hours, concentration, and study devoted to it are more pleasurable than painful to him. He chooses such activities voluntarily. Nature the real artist. Nothing can rightly be called work which one does out of sheer preference. Work never made an actress and work never made a singer, where innate talent for these arts was lacking. Nature, the true maker of every famous name, bestowed 90%, and man, if he hustle, can provide the other very necessary 10. but his sense of humor is not his sense of justice should be sufficient to prevent his trying to rob the Almighty of his due. Success for all. Every individual who is not feeble-minded can be a success at some time in this big world. Every normal-minded individual is able to create, invent, improve, organize, build or market some of the myriad of things the world is crying for. But he will succeed at only those things in which his physiological and psychological mechanism perform their function easily and naturally. Why we work. Man is, by inclination, very little of a worker. He is first a wanter, a bundle of instincts; second a feeler, a hustle of emotions; last and least he is a thinker. What will work he does is done not because he likes it, but because it serves one of these first two bundles of instincts. When the desire for leisure is stronger than the other urges, leisure wins. But in all ambitious men and women the desire for other things outweighs the leisure urge. Ambition and type. Now what is it that causes some to have ambition and others to lack it? Your ambitions take the form determined by your predominating physiological system. For instance, in every great singer, the thoracic has been present, either as the first or second element. The effect of the physical upon our talents is no more marked anywhere than here, for it is his unusual lung power, his high chest, the sounding box in his nose section, and his superior vocal cords that makes the real foundation of every singer's fame. These physiological conditions are found in extreme degree only in persons of thoracic tendencies. It was the great lung power of Caruso that made him a great singer. It was his remarkable heart power that brought him through an illness in February 1921, when every newspaper in the world carried on its front page the positive statement that he could not live another day. That he lived for 6 months afterward was due chiefly to his remarkable heart. The nature resulting from a large heart and large lungs is one distinctly different from all others. In short, the thoracic nature. The best dressed. The best dressed man and the best dressed woman in your town belong predominantly to this type. This is no accident. The thoracic, being possessed of acute eye senses, are more sensitive to color and line than any other type. These are the foundation of style and artistic grooming. Clothes can unmake the man. Being desirous of the approval of others and realizing that though clothes do not make the man, they can unmake him, this type looks to his laurel on this point. Because clothes determine the first impression we made upon strangers, and because that impression is difficult to change, clothes are of vast importance in this maze of human relationships. The thoracic is more sensitive to the attitude of others because their attitude is more vital to his self-expression. He senses from childhood the bearing that clothes have for or against him in the opinion of others, and how they can aid him to express his personality. The glass of fashion. The thoracic therefore often becomes the glass of fashion and the mold of form. His consciousness of himself is so keen that, even when alone, he prefers those things in dress which are at once fine, fancy, and fashionable. Some types are indifferent to clothes, some ignorant of clothes, and some defiant in their clothes. But the thoracic always have the keen sense of fitness in the matter of apparel. Distinction in dress. The distinctive dresser is one who essays the extremely fashionable, the last moment touch. He is always a step or two ahead of the times. His ties, handbags, handkerchiefs, and stick pins are up to the minute. Such a man or woman invariably has a large thoracic development and is well repaid by the public for his pains. Dress the universal language. The public looks more eagerly than we suppose to changes in styles and fads. It gives, in spite of itself, instantaneous admiration of a sort to those who follow the dictates of fashion. This being one of the quickest roads to adulation, it is often utilized by this type. The newest in hairdressing. The latest thing in coiffures is always known by the Thoracic woman, and because she is, more often than any other type, a beautiful woman, she can wear her hair in almost any style and find it becoming. So when puffs were the thing, this type of woman not only wore puffs, but the most extreme and numerous puffs. When the sticking to the face style was in vogue, she bought much bandoline and essayed the slickest and shiniest hair of all. When the ear bun raged, she changed those same paper-like curls overnight into veritable young silver cushions. Always on dress parade. With intent to keep the spotlight on himself, the Thoracic is always on dress parade. He is vividly aware of himself. He knows what kind of picture he is making. He is seldom self-conscious in the sense of being timid. When he does happen to be timid, he suffers, by reason of his greater desire for approval, more acutely than any other type. Affectability his keynote. Instantaneous reaction to stimuli, with all the reflex action resulting therefrom, constitute the keynote of this type. This makes an individual who is physiologically and psychologically affectable. Because life is full of all kinds of stimuli, acting during every waking moment upon every sense in the organism, any person who is high-strung finds himself in the midst of what might be called nerve bedlam. Gets the most out of everything. Because of this same highly sensitized make-up, the Thoracic gets more sensations out of every incident than the rest of us do. He experiences more joy in the space of a lifetime, but also more disappointment. The Human Violin. For the same reason that violin vibrates to a greater number of sounds than the organ, the Thoracic is a more vibrant individual than others. He is impelled to an expressiveness of voice, manner, and action that often looks like pretense to less impulsive people. In other types it would be, but to the Thoracic it is so natural and normal that he is often much surprised to hear that he has the reputation of being affected. A reputation for flightiness. This lightning-like liveliness of face, body, and voice, his quick replies and instantaneous reaction to everything also cause him to be called flighty. The quick thinker. We are prone to judge everyone by ourselves. People whose mental or physical senses are less keyed up, less sensitive, call the Thoracic rattle-brained. Usually such a man's brain is not rattled at all. It is working, as all brains do in response to the message reaching it, like the telegraph wire of the five senses. In the Thoracic, these wires happen to be more dulled than in other types. He gets sensations from sights, sounds, tastes, touches, and smells much more quickly than the rest of us do. These messages are sent to the brain more rapidly, and since sensation is responsible for much of our thinking, this man's brain thinks a little more speedily than that of other types. It does not necessarily think any better. Often it does need slowing down, but compared to the thought power of some of the other types, the Thoracic's speed made up for much of his carelessness. He makes more mistakes in judgment than other types, but can right about face so quickly he usually remedies them while other types are still trying to decide when to start. To hold himself back is the hardest lesson for this type to learn. His changeability. This tendency to let himself go brings the Thoracic a great deal of unhappiness and failure. He plunges so quickly that he often fails to take into consideration the various elements of the situation. His physical senses tell him a thing should be done and rush him headlong into action that he knows are ill-advised the moment he has time to think them over. In turning around and righting his mistakes, he often hears himself called changeable and vacillating. His batting average. In this, as in other things, we have a tendency towards smugglers, short-sightedness, and egoism. The man who makes but one mistake a year because he makes but two decisions is wrong 50% of the time. Yet he self-satisfiedly considers himself superior to the Thoracic because he has caught the latter in 6 poor deals within 6 months. At the rate the average Thoracic as this would be about one mistake in 1,000, a much better batting average than the other man's. But because the confidence of others in our stability is of prime importance to us all, this type or anyone inclined to definite thoracic tendency should take pains to prevent this impression from settling into the minds of his friends. Should get onto the highway. The greatest reason for striving towards stability in action and more slowness in decision, however, is for his own future's sake. The man who is constantly making decisions and being compelled to alter them gets nowhere. He may have the best engine and the finest car in the world, but if he runs first down this bypath and then that, he will make little progress on the main highway. Should have an aim. An aim, a definite goal, is essential to the progress of any individual. It should be made with care and in keeping with one's personality, talents, training, education, environment, and experience, and having been made should be adhered to with the determination which does not permit little things to interfere with it. End of Section 5 of Chapter 2. Of Chapter 2 of How to Analyze People on Sight. This is a LibriVoice recording. All LibriVoice recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVoice.org. How to Analyze People on Sight through the Science of Human Analysis. The 5 Human Types by Elsie Lincoln Benedict and Ralph Paine Benedict. Section 6 of Chapter 2. Eliminating non-essentials. The big problem of individual success is the problem of eliminating non-essentials, of hewing to the line, letting the chips fall where they may. Most of the things that steal your time, strength, money, and energy are nothing but chips. If you pay too much attention to them, you will never hew out anything worthwhile. No vain regrets. If you are thoracic, don't regret the fact that you are not a one decision a year man, but try to make fewer and better decisions. Your quickness, if called into counsel, will enable you to see from what instincts your mistakes habitually arise and the direction in which most of them have pointed. And you will see this with so much greater dispatch than the average person that you will lose little time. You should begin today to analyze your most common error in judgment that you may guard against their recurrence. Always slightly thrilled. Even when apparently composed, the thoracic is always a wee bit thrilled. Everything he sees, hears, touches, tastes, or smells gives him such keen sensation that he lives momentarily in some kind of adventure. He languishes in an unchanging environment and finds monotony almost unbearable. Lights and shadows. Never 2 minutes the same fitly describe this type. He passes rapidly from one vivid sensation to another and expresses each one so completely that he is soon ready for the next. He has fewer complexes than any other type because he does not inhibit as much. The uncorked bottle. The lid is always off the thoracic. This being the case, he suffers little from mental congestion, though he sometimes pays a high price for his self-expression. Everybody is interesting. Most of us are much more interesting than the world suspects, but the world is not made up of mind readers. We keep our most interesting thoughts, the most interesting sides of ourselves hidden away. Even your dearest friends are seldom given a peep into the actual you. And this despite the fact that we all recognize this as a deficiency in others. We bottle up ourselves and defy the world's corkscrews, all save the Thoracic. He allows his associates to see much of what is passing in his mind all the time. Because we are all interested in the real individual and not in mass, this type is usually much sought after. No secretive. The Thoracic does not by preference cover up. He does not by preference secret. He does not, except when necessary, keep his pen and ways dark. He is likely to tell not only his family but his nearest acquaintance just what he is planning to do and how he expects to do it. The naturally secretive person who regularly refers to a certain party when he has occasion to speak of another is the exact opposite of this type. His human interest. We are all interested in the little comings and goings of our friends. Upon this fact every magazine and newspaper builds its human interest stories. We may be indifferent to what the President of the United States is doing about international relations, but what he had for breakfast is mightily interesting. Few people read inaugural addresses, significant though they often are to the world and to the reader himself. But if the President would write 10 volumes on just how I spend my Sundays, it would be a bestseller. Naturally confidential. Personal experiences, personal secrets, and personal preference are subjects we are all interested in. These are the very things in which the Thoracic regales his friends and about which he is more frank and outspoken than any other type. He makes many friends by his obvious openness and his capacity for seeing the interesting details which others overlook. Charming conversationalist. Colorful, vivid words and phrases come easily to the tongue of this type, for he sees the unusual, the fascinating in everything. Since anyone can make a thing interesting to others if he is really interested in it himself, the Thoracic makes others see and feel what he describes. He is therefore known as the most charming conversationalist. Beautiful voice. The most beautiful voice belong to people who are largely of this type. This is due, as we have said before, to physiological causes. The high chest, sensitive vocal cords, capacious sounding boards in the nose and roof of the mouth all tend to give the voice of the Thoracic many nuances and accents never found in other types. His pleasing voice, plus his vividness of his expressions, and his lack of reticence in giving the intimate and interesting details are other traits which help to make the Thoracic a lively companion. The Law of Spontaneity. The most beloved people in the world are the spontaneous. We lead such drab lives ourselves and keep back so much. We like to see a little Niagara of human emotion occasionally. The Thoracic feels everything keenly. Life's experience makes vivid record on the sensitive page of his mind. He puts them on the rectoral that is himself and proceeds to run them off for your entertainment. Sometimes a bubbler. A constant stream of talk must have been first said in describing this type. For while others are carefully guarding their real feeling and thoughts, the Thoracic goes merrily on relieving himself of this. More sedate and somber types call the Thoracic bubbler or spouters, just for this reason. The incessant talker. "That person's talk gets on my nerves" is a remark often made by one of the staid, stiff type concerning the seldom silent, extremely florid individual. So natural is this to the Thoracic that he is entirely unconscious of the wearing effect he has on other people. A sense of humor. Seeing the funny side of everything is a capacity which comes more naturally to this type than to others. This is due to the psychological fact that nothing is truly humorous save what is slightly out of plumb. Real humor lies in detecting and describing that intangible quirk. No type has the sensitiveness essential to this in any such degree as the Thoracic. Individuals of other types sometimes possess a keen sense of humor. This trait is not confined to the Thoracic, but it is a significant fact that almost every humorist of note has had this type as the first or second element in his make-up. The human fireworks, "he is a skyrocket" or "she is a firefly" are phrases often used to describe that vivacious individual whose adeptness as repartee puts the rest of the crowd in the background. These people are always largely or purely Thoracic. They never belong predominantly to the fourth type. The next time you find such a person, note how his eyes flash, how his color comes and goes, and the many indescribable gradations of voice which make him the center of things. "He is always shooting sparks," said a man recently in describing a florid, high-chested friend. Never doubt commonly. His line may not interest you, but the Thoracic himself is usually interesting. He is an actual curiosity to the quiet, inexpressive people who never can fathom how he managed to talk so frankly and so fast. Such a person is seldom dull. He is everything from a condiment to a cocktail and has the same effect on the average group of more or less trapped personalities. Lives in the heights and depths. Glad one moment and sad the next is the way the ticker would read if it could make a record of the inner feelings of the average Thoracic. These feelings often come and go without his having the least notion of what causes them. Ordinarily, these unaccountable moods are due to sensations reaching his subconscious mind, of which no cognizance is taken by his conscious processes. Called intuitive. This ability to get things, to respond quickly with his physical reaction while devoting his mental ones to something else, has obtained for this type the reputation of possessing more intuition than others. Sources of hunches. That there is no such thing as intuition in the odd sense of getting a hunch from the outside is now agreed by psychologists. The thing we have called intuition, they maintain, is not due to irregular or supernatural causes, but to our own normal natural mental processes. The impression that he gets this knowledge or suspicion from the outside is due, the scientists say, to the fact that his thinking has proceeded at such lightning-like speed that he was unable to watch the wheels go round. The only thing of which he is conscious is the final result or sum at the bottom of the column called his hunch. He is not aware of the addition and subtraction which his mind went through to get it for him. Easily excited. "Off like a shot" is a term often applied to the Thoracic. He is the most easily excited of all types, but also the most easily calmed. He recovers from every mood more quickly and more completely than other types. Under the influence of emotion, he often does things for which he is sorry immediately afterward. On the spur of the moment. This type usually does a thing quickly or not at all. He is a gun that is always cocked. So he hits a great many things in the course of a lifetime and leads the most exciting existence of any type. Being able to get thrills out of the most commonplace event because of seeing elements in it which others overlook, he finds in everyday life more novelty than others ever see. The adventurers. Romance and adventure always interest this type. He lives for thrills and novel reactions, and usually spares no pain or money to get them. A very slangy but very expressive term used frequently by these people is, "I got a real kick out of that." This craving for adventure, suspense, and zest usually lures this type into speculation, gambling, and various games of chance. The danger in flying, deep-sea diving, auto racing, and similar thrills have a strong appeal for this type. So strong that practically every man or woman who follows these professions is of this type. Tires of sameness. The Thoracic soon tires of the same suit, the same gown, the same house, the same town, and even the same girl. He wrings the utmost out of each experience so quickly and so completely that he is forever on the lookout for new worlds to conquer. Past experiences are to him as so many lemons out of which he has taken all the juice. He anticipates those of the future as so many more to be utilized in the same way. Like responsive people. We all like answers. We want to be assured that what we have said or done has registered. The Thoracic is always saying or doing something and can't understand why other people are so unresponsive. He is as responsive as a radio wire. Everything hits the mark with him and he lets you know it. So, naturally, he enjoys the same from others and considers those less expressive than himself stiff, formal, or dull. The kind of person the Thoracic likes best is one sufficiently like himself to nod, smile, and show that he fully understands, but who will not interrupt his stream of talk. People he dislikes. The stolid, indifferent, or cold are people the Thoracic comes very near disliking. The evident self-complacency and immobility are things he does not understand at all, and with which he has little patience. Such people seem to him to be cold, unfeeling, almost dead. So he steers clear of them. It was surely a Thoracic who first called these people sticks. But the reason for their acting like sticks will be apparent in another chapter. His pet aversions. Whereas the Alimentive avoids people he does not care for, the Thoracic is inclined to betray his aversions. He occasionally delights to put people he dislikes at a disadvantage by his wit or satire. The stony individual who walks through life like an Ionian pillar is a complete mystery to the Thoracic, and the pillar returns the compliment. We do not like anything we do not understand, and we seldom understand anything that differs decidedly from ourselves. Thus we distrust and dislike foreigners, and to a greater or lesser extent other families, people from other sections of the country, etc. The Easterner and Westerner has a natural distrust of each other, and the Civil War is not the only reason for the incompatibility of Southerners and Northerners. So it is with individuals. Those who differ too widely in type never understand each other. They have too little of the chief thing that builds friendships, emotions in common. The forgiving man. If you have once been a real friend of the Thoracic, and a quarrel comes between you, he may be ever so bitter and biting in the moment of his anger, but in most cases he will forgive you eventually. Really forgets disagreements. It is not as easy for other types to forgive. They often refrain from attempting a reconciliation. But the Thoracic's forgiveness is not only spontaneous but genuine. The Alimentive bear no grudges because it is too much trouble. The Thoracic finds it hard to maintain a grudge because he gets over it just as he gets over everything else. His anger oozes away or he wakes up some fine morning and finds, like the boy recovering from the chicken pox, that he simply hasn't it any more. Diseases he is most susceptible to. Acute diseases are the ones chiefly affecting this type. Everything in his organism tends to suddenness and not to sameness. Just as he is inclined to get into and out of psychological experiences quickly, so he is inclined to sudden illnesses and to sudden recuperations. A Thoracic seldom has any kind of chronic ailment. If he acquires a superabundance of quadruples, he is in danger of apoplexy. The combination of extreme Thoracic and extreme Alimentive tendencies is the cause of this disease. Likes fancy foods. Variety and novelty in food are much enjoyed by this type. The Alimentive likes lots of rich food, but he is not so desirous of various or freak dishes. But the Thoracic specializes in them. You cannot mention any kind of strange new dish whose investigation won't appeal to someone in the crowd, and that person is always somewhat Thoracic. It gives him another promise of newness. Foreign dishes of all kinds depend for the introduction into this country almost entirely upon these foreign patrons. According to the statements of restauranteurs, this type says, "I will try anything once." Many-course dinners, if the food is good, are especially popular with them. The trimmings at dinner. Out of the ordinary surroundings in which to dine are always welcome to this type. The hangings, pictures, and furniture mean much to him. Most people like music at meals, but to the Thoracic it is almost indispensable. He is so alive in every nerve, so keyed up and has such intense capacity for enjoyment of many things simultaneously that he demands more than other types. An attentive waiter who ministers to every movement and anticipates every wish is also a favorite with the Thoracic when out for dinner. Sensitive to his surroundings. Colorful surroundings are more necessary to the Thoracic than to other types. The ever-changing fashion in house decorations are welcome innovations to him. He soon grows tired of a thing regardless of how much he liked it to begin with. Take notice amongst your friends, and you will see that the girl who changes the furniture all around every few weeks is invariably of this type. "It makes me feel that I have changed my location and takes the place of a trip," explained one girl not long ago. "Wants something different." The exact color of hangings, wallpaper, interior decorations and accessories are matter of vital importance to this type. Whereas the Alimentive demand comfort, the Thoracic asks for something different, something that catches and holds the eyes, that makes an instantaneous impression upon the onlooker and gives him one more thing by which to remember the personality of the one who lives there. This type considers his room and home as part of himself and takes the pains with them which he bestows upon his clothes. When he is rich, wealth to the Thoracic means unlimited opportunity for achieving the unusual in everything. His tastes are more extravagant than those of other types. Uncommon works of art are usually found in the homes of this type. The most extraordinary things from the most extraordinary places are a special preference with him. He carries out his desire for attention here as in everything else, and what he buys will serve that end directly or indirectly. Fashion and flair. Flair aptly describes the quality with the pure Thoracic design in all that touches him and his personality. It must have worth and go and distinctiveness. It must be the latest and the thing. He is the last type of all to submit to wearing last year's suit, singing last year's songs, or driving is a last year's model. Likes dash. The Thoracic wants everything he wears, drives, lives in, or owns to get across, to make an impression. The fat man loves comfort above all else, but the florid man loves distinction. He does not demand such easy-to-wear garments as the fat man. On the contrary, he will undergo extreme discomfort if it gives him a distinctive appearance. He wants his house to be elegant, the grounds different, the view unusual. Has color sense. Whereas the fat man when furnishing a home devotes his attention to soft beds, steam heat and plenty of cushioned divans, the Thoracic thinks of the chandeliers, the unusual chairs, the pretty front doorstep, the landscape gardening and the color schemes. When he is in moderate circumstances. When only well-to-do, this type will be found to have carried out furnishing and decoration with the taste worthy of much larger purses. When merely well-to-do, he wears the very best clothes he can possibly afford, and often a good deal better. This type does not purpose to be outwitted by life. He tries always to put up a good showing. When he is poor. The Thoracic is seldom poor. He has so much personality, ginger, and gold of the sort that is required in the world of today that he usually has a good position. He may not like the position, but in spite of the fact that he finds it harder to tolerate disagreeable things than any other type, he will endure it, for he knows that the rewards he is after cannot be had by the down and outer. The natural and normal vanity of the Thoracic stands him in hand here more than in almost any other place in life. The world entertained by them. Behind every row of footlights you will find more people of this type than any other. The Alimentive manages the world, but the Thoracic entertains it. He comprises more of the dancers, actors, operatic stars, and general entertainers than any other two types combined. In everything save acrobatics and oratory he holds the platform laurels. As already pointed out, his adaptability, spontaneity, and love of approval are responsible for this. His fastidious habits. The Thoracic is the most fastidious of all the types. His thin skin and sensitive nerves makes him more conscious of roughness and slovenliness than others. The result is that he is what is called more particular about his person than other types. The fat man often wears an old pair of shoes long past their usefulness, but the florid man thinks more of the impression he creates than of his own personal comfort, and will wear the shiniest of patent leathers on the hottest day if they are the best match for his suit. Likes all music. Every kind of music is enjoyed by the pure Thoracic because he experiences so many moods. Entertainment he prefers. Social affairs of an exclusive order where he wears his bad bib and tucker and everybody else does the same are amongst the favorable diversions of this type. He makes a favorable impression under such conditions and is well aware of it. Other reasons for this preference are his brilliant conversational powers, his charm and his enjoyment of other people and their viewpoints. The Thoracic is also exceedingly fond of dancing, enjoys vaudeville. The average Thoracic enjoys vaudeville, follies, and revues, etc., because they are full of quick changes of program. He enjoys, as does every type, certain kinds of movies, but he constitutes no such percentage of the movie-going audience as some other types. Reading. Books and stories that are romantic, adventurous, and different are the favorites of this type. Detective stories are often in high favor with him also. Physical assets. The physical advantages of this type are his quick energy, based on his wonderful breathing system, and the rich, rapid flowing blood, produced by his wonderful heart system. He is noted for his ability to get his second wind, and has remarkable capacity for rising to sudden physical emergencies. Physical liabilities. A tendency to overexcitement and the consequent running down of his batteries is a physical pitfall often fatal to this type. Favorite sports. Hurdling, sprinting, tennis, and all sports requiring short, intense bursts of energy are the ones in which this type excels. Social assets. Charms and responsiveness are the chief social assets of the Thoracic. Inasmuch as these are the most valuable of all social traits, he has a better natural start in human relationships than any other type. Social liabilities. Quick temper, his inflammable nature and appearance of vanity are his greatest social liabilities. They stand between him and success many times. He must learn to control them if he decides to reap the full benefit of his remarkable assets. Emotional assets. Instantaneous sympathy and a lack of poisonous inhibitions are the outstanding emotion assets of this type. Emotional liabilities. Impatient micro-emotions and the expenditure of too much of his electricity in every little experience are the tendency most to be guarded against. Business assets. That he is a good mixer and has the magnetism to interest and attract others are his most valuable business traits. Business liabilities. An appearance of flightiness and his tendency to hop from one subject to another stand in the way of the Thoracic's promotion many times. Domestic strength. The ability to entertain and please his own family and to give of himself to them as freely as he gives himself to the world at large is one of the most lovable thoracic traits. Domestic weakness. The temperament and temper of this type constitute a real domestic problem for those who live with them, but they are so forgiving themselves that it is almost impossible to hold anything against them. Should aim at. The Thoracic should aim at making fewer decisions, at finishing what he starts, and of wasting less energy in unnecessary words and motions. Should avoid all situations, conditions, and people who slip the belt off the wheel, who tend to cut life up into bits by dissipation or pleasure seeking, should be avoided by this type because they aggregate his own weakness in that direction. Strong points. Personal ambition, adaptability, and quick physical energy are the strongest points of the Thoracic. Weakest points. Too great excitability, irresponsibility, and supersensitiveness are the weakest points of this type. How to deal with this type socially. Give him aesthetic surroundings, encourage him to talk, and respond to what he says. These are the certain methods for winning him in social intercourse. How to deal with this type in business. Get his name on the dotted line now, or don't expect it. If he is an employee, let him come into direct contact with people. Give his personality a chance to get business for you. Don't forget to praise him when deserved, and don't pin him down to routine. This type succeeds best in professions where his personal charm can be capitalized, and does not belong in any strictly commercial business. Remember, the chief distinguishing mark of the Thoracic in the order of their importance are flushed complexion, high chest, and long waist. Any person who has this is largely of the Thoracic type, no matter what other types might be included in his makeup. End of Section 6 of Chapter 2.
Section 1 of Chapter 3 of How to Analyze People on Sight. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Paul Andrews. How to Analyze People on Sight Through the Science of Human Analysis. The 5 Human Types by Elsie Lincoln Benedict and Ralph Paine Benedict. Section 1 of Chapter 3. Chapter 3. The Muscular Type. The Worker. People in whom the muscular system is proportionately larger and more highly developed than any of their other systems are musculars. This system consists of the muscles of the organism. The lean meat types. The muscle system of the human body is simply a coordinated, organized arrangement of layers of lean meat, of which every individual has a complete set. An individual's muscles may be small, flabby, deficient in strength, or so thin as to be almost imperceptible, but they're always there, elementary in the infant, full grown in the adult, and remnants in the aged. But they're so smoothly fitted together, so closely knitted, and usually so well covered, that we seldom realize their complexity or their importance. In the pure muscular type, his muscles are firm and large. Such muscles cannot be disguised, but seem to stand out all over him. Helpless without them. Without them we would be helpless masses of fat and bone. We could not blink an eye, nor lift a finger. Yet we are so accustomed to them that we rarely think of them and seldom give them credit for what they do. Without their wonder work to adjust the eyes, we could not see. Without their power, the heart would cease to beat. We cannot smile, sob, speak, nor sing without using them. We would have no pianists, violinists, dancers, aviators, inventors, or workers of any kind without them. Everything we put together, from hooks and eyes to skyscrapers, is planned by our brains, but depends for its materialization upon the muscles of the human body. How to know him. Look at any individual, and you'll note one of these 3 conditions: that his bones seem to be covered by just skin and sinews, which means that he belongs to the 4th type, or thickly padded with fat, in which case he is largely of the 1st type, or well upholstered with firm meat. In the latter case he is largely muscular, no matter what other types may be present in his makeup. In a short time you'll be able to tell at a glance whether the padding on an individual is mostly fat or mostly muscle, because fat is always round and soft, while muscle is firm and definite. Physical solidity. A general solidity of structure, as distinguished from the softness of the alimentive and the resilience of the thoracic, characterizes the muscular. Poke your finger into a fat man's hand, and though it makes a dent, that dent puffs back quickly. Do the same to a muscular, and you'll find a firmness and toughness of fiber that resists but stays there longer once the dent is made. Not so malleable. This little illustration is just typical of the differences between these 2 natures throughout their entirety. Just as a fat man's face gives to your touch, he will give in to you more easily than any other type, but he will go back to the same place sooner and more smoothly when your pressure is removed. The muscular does not mold so easily, is less suggestible, is less tractable than the alimentive or thoracic, but is less likely to revert afterwards. Built on the square. On the square is a figurative expression usually applying to a moral tendency. In this sense, it is as often possessed by one type as another. But in a purely literal sense, the muscular is actually built on the square. His whole figure is a combination of squares. The alimentive is built upon the circle, the thoracic on the kite shape, but the pure muscular always tends toward a squareness of outline. We repeat, he is no more square morally than any other type, so don't make the mistake of attributing any more of this virtue to him than to others. Each type has its own weaknesses and points of strength as differentiated from other types, and these are responsible for most of the moral differences between people. No type superior morally. Since moral weaknesses come from type weaknesses, and since each type possesses about as many weaknesses as the others, it follows that no type is superior morally to any other, and no type is morally inferior to any other. Type and temptation. Morality is mostly a matter of how much temptation you can withstand. Every individual in a civilized community is surrounded by temptations of some kind most of the time. He does not want to yield to any of them. Every man and woman does the best of which his particular type is capable under a given circumstance. Each individual resists many temptations for which we fail to give him credit. He yields only to those which make such a strong appeal to his type that he lacks the power of resistance. In other words, each person yields to the temptations that prey upon his particular weaknesses, and what his weaknesses are will depend upon his type. In the grip of these temptations, he may commit anything from discourtesy to crime, according to the strength of the temptation, plus his own leaning in that direction. On the other hand, certain immoralities, which appear strongly to some types, have no attraction whatever for others, and these latter get credit for a virtuousness that has cost them nothing. Praise and punishment. On the other hand, each one of the 5 human types has certain points of strength, and from these gets its natural moral qualities. We spend a great deal of energy giving praise and blame, but when we realize, as we're doing more and more, that the type of an individual is responsible for most of his acts, we will give less of both to the individual and more of both to the Creator. Type versus training. The most that training can do is to brace up the weak spots in us, to cultivate the strong ones, and to teach us to avoid inimical environments, and to constantly remind us of the penalties we pay whenever we digress. Child training. As this great science of human analysis becomes known, the world will understand for the first time how the other half lives and why it lives that way. We will know why one child just naturally tells fibs while his twin brother, under identical training, just naturally tells the truth. What is more to the point, will know this in their childhood and be prepared to give to each the kind of training which will weed out his worst and bring out his best. Short and stocky. The extreme muscular type is below medium height, though one of any height may be largely muscular. The extreme type of which we are treating in this chapter is shorter and heavier than the average, but his heaviness is due to muscle instead of fat. He has the appearance of standing firmly, solidly upon the ground, of being stalwart and strong. The square-shouldered man. The muscular's shoulders stand out more nearly at right angles than those of any other type, and are much broader in proportion to his height. The alimentive has sloping shoulders, and the thoracic inclines to high shoulders. But the shoulders of the pure muscular are straighter and have a squareness where the alimentives have curves. This accounts for the fact that most of the square-shouldered men you have known were not tall men, but medium or below medium in height. The wide, square shoulders do not accompany any other pure type, though naturally they may be present in an individual who is a combination. Has proportionately long arms. The arms of pure musculars are longer in proportion to the body than the arms of other types. The arms of the alimentive are short for his body, but the extreme muscular's arms are always anywhere from slightly longer to very much longer than his height would lead you to expect. The pure muscular head. A square head is the first thing you think of when you look at a pure muscular. His head has no such decided digressions from the normal as the round head of the alimentive or the kite-shaped head of the thoracic. It is not high for his body like the thoracic's, nor small for his body like the alimentive's, but it is of average proportions. His thick neck. A distinctive feature of this type is his thick neck. It is not fat like that of the alimentive, nor medium long like that of the thoracic, but has unusual muscularity and strength. This is one of the chief indications of the muscular's strength. A sturdy neck is one of the most significant indications of physical prowess and longevity, while the frail neck, of which we shall speak in connection with the fifth type, is always a sign of the physical frailty which endangers life. The thickness of his neck may sometimes give you the impression that the muscular head is small, but if you will look again, you'll see that it is normal for his bodily size. His square face. Looking at him from directly in front, you will see that the muscular's face gives you an impression of squareness. You will also notice that his side head, cheeks, and jaw run up and down in such a way as to give him a right-angled face. His square jaw. A broad jaw is another characteristic of this type. Not only is it square, looked at from the front, but you're pretty sure to note that the jaw bones, as they proceed downward under the ear, tend to make a right-angled turn at the corners instead of a rounded curve. These dimensions tend to give the whole lower part of the muscular's face a box-like appearance. It is considered becoming to men, but it robs its female owners of the delicate pointed chin so much desired by women. The typical muscular hand. Notice the hands of the people you meet, and you'll be surprised to see how different and how interesting they are. Their size, shape, and structure as seen from the back of the hand are especially significant and tell us much more about the individual's nature than the palm does. Perhaps you have thought that a hand was just a hand, but there are hands and hands. Each pure type has its own, and no other is ever seen on the extreme of that type. The hand of the muscular, like all the rest of his body, is built in a series of squares. It runs out from the wrist and down in a straighter line and tends to right angles. The square fingers of this type. Spatulate fingers, meaning fingers that are square or paddle-shaped at the tips, are sure indications of a dedicated muscular tendency. He may have other types in combination, but if his fingers are really square, sawed off at the ends, in such a way as to give them large instead of tapering ends, that person has more than average muscularity, and the activities of his life will tend in the directions referred to in this chapter. The manual worker. Musculars are the hand workers of the world. They are the artisans, craftsmen, constructors, and builders. We all tend to use most of these organs or parts of the body which are largest and most highly developed. The muscular's hand is proportionately larger than the hand of any other type. It has more muscle, that one element without which good handwork is impossible. So it has followed inevitably that the manual work of the world is done largely by musculars. Their hands are also so much more powerful that they do not tire easily. The hand of a creative artist. The artist's hand and the artistic hand are phrases long used, but misused. Delicate tapering fingers were supposed, in ancient times, to denote artistic ability. The frail curving hand was also supposed to be the sign of an artistic talent. From the stage of old down to the movies of today, the typical artist is pictured with a slight, slender hand. This tapering fingered hand denotes a keen sense of artistic values, a love of the aesthetic, refined and beautiful, and real artistic appreciation, but not the ability to create. The hand arts. Before we explain this, kindly understand that we're speaking only of these arts which require handwork, and not of such arts such as singing, dancing, or musical composition, which could more properly be called artistic activities. We are referring only to those arts which depend upon their creation upon the human hand, such as painting, architecture, craftsmanship, cartooning, sculpture, violin, piano, etc. All these are created by square-fingered people. We are too much inclined to think of the products of these arts as being created out of sheer artistic sense, artistic taste, or artistic insight. But a moment's reflection will show that every tangible artistic creation is the result of unusual handwork combined with gifted headwork. Without a sure, strong, well-knit hand, the ideas of the greatest artists could never have materialized. The lack of such a hand explains why the aesthetic, the artistic-minded, and the connoisseur do not create the beautiful things they appreciate. Head and hand partners. The hand must execute what the brain plans, and it must be so perfect a mechanism for this that it responds to the most elusive inspirations of the artist. It must be a 50% partner, else its owner will never produce real art. No type has this strong, sure, coordinated hand machine to any such degree as the muscular. The finger ends, which are of the utmost significance in the creation of artistic things, must be fitted with the well-developed muscles of extreme efficiency, or the execution will fall short of the ideal pictured in the artist's mind. The pure muscular type seldom makes an artist, for, after all, inspired brain work is the other important element in the creation of art, and this is the forte of the fifth type. A combination of the fifth type with the muscular makes most hand artists. A combination of the muscular and thoracic makes most singers. Every hand artist will be found to have spatulate-fingered hands, in short, muscular hands. The hand of the famous craftsman, pianist, sculptor, and painter, instead of being more frail and delicate, is always larger and heavier than that of the average person. Such a hand is a certain indication of the muscular element in that individual's makeup. His powerful movements. Forceful and decisive movements also characterize this type. He is inclined to go at even the most trivial things with as much force as if the world depended on it. Recently we were exhibiting a small pencil sharpener to a muscular friend. It was so sharp that it performed its work without pressure, but she took hold of it as if it were a piece of artillery and pushed the pencil into it with all the force she had. When we remonstrated smilingly, for her face and hands are ultra square, she said, "But I can't do anything lightly. I just naturally put that much force into everything." His forceful walk. Heavy, powerful, forceful strides distinguish the walk of this type. If he has but 10 steps to go, he will start off as if beginning an around-the-world marathon. You hear him coming. All musculars notify people, by their walk, of their approach. They are unconscious of this loud, incisive tread, and most of them will be surprised to read it here, but their friends will recognize it. The chances are they've often spoken of it amongst themselves. The loud voice. The steam calliope voice belongs almost always to a muscular. He does his talking just as he does everything else, with all of his might. It is very difficult for a muscular to tone down this powerful voice. His long-suffering friends will testify to this characteristic. His Stentorian Tones. This loud voice is a serious social handicap to him. His only chance of compensation for it lies in its use before juries, congregations, or large audiences. It might be noted here that every great orator has been largely of this type, and also that his fame came not alone from the things he said, but from the stentorian tones in which he said them. Famous male singers. Caruso, John McCormack, and all other famous male singers had large thoracic systems, but in every instance it was combined with a large muscular development. The solid sitter. When a muscular sits down, he does it as he does everything, with a definiteness and force. He does not spill over as does the Alimentive, nor drape himself gracefully like the thoracic, but planks himself as though he meant business. Activity his keynote. Because he is especially built for it, the muscular is more active than any other type. Without muscles, no organism could move itself from the spot in which it was born. Biology teaches us that the stomach was the first thing evolved. The original one-call organism possessed but one function, digestion. As life progressed, it became necessary to send nutriment to those parts of the organism not touched by the stomach. For the purpose of reaching these suburbs, there was involved the circulatory or thoracic system, and this gave rise, as we have seen in the previous chapter, to the thoracic type. Movement and development. As time went on, movement became necessary, full development not being possible to any static organism. And to meet this need, muscles were evolved and organic life began to move. It was only a wiggle at first, but that wiggle has grown until today it includes every time of labor, globe-trotting and immigration. The muscular is fitted with the best traveling equipment of any type and invariably lives a life whose main reactions express these things. The immigrant muscular. No matter what his work or play, the muscular will make more moves during the course of a day than other types. He loves action because his muscles, being over-equipped for it, keep urging him from within to do things. As a result, this type makes up most of the immigrants of the world. Italian, Poles, Greeks, Russians, Germans and Jews are largely of this type, and these are races furnishing the largest number of foreigners in America. Inertness irks him. Shut up a muscular and you destroy him. His big muscle system cries out for something to do. He becomes restless, nervous, and ill when confined or compelled to be idle. The Alimentive loves an easy time, but the Muscular dislikes ease, except when exhausted. Even then it is almost impossible to stop him. Must be doing something. I can't bear to be doing nothing, you often hear people say. Such a person always has plenty of muscle. Musculars want to feel that they are not wasting time. They must be up and doing, accomplishing something. If there is nothing near them that needs doing, they are sure to go and find something. The born worker. Work is second nature to this type. He really prefers it. Everyone likes some kind of work when in the mood, if it serves a purpose or an ideal. But the Muscular likes work for its own sake, or rather for the activity's sake. Work pulls on the Alimentive and monotony on the Thoracic, but leisure is what pulls on the Muscular. He may have worked 10 years without a vacation, and he may imagine he wants a long one, but by the morning of the third day you will notice he's found a piece of work for himself. It may be nothing more than hanging the screen door, chopping the wood, or dusting the furniture, but it will furnish him with some kind of activity. Because he enjoys action for its own sake, and because work is only applied action, this type makes the best worker. He can be trusted to work harder than any other type. Requires less watching. It is no accident that the 300 men, gangs of foreign workmen who dig ditches, tunnels and tubes, construct buildings, railroads and cities, work with fewer foremen and supervisors than are ordinarily required to keep much smaller forces of other employees at their posts. End of section 1 of chapter 3. Part 2 of chapter 3 of How to Analyze People on Sight. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Paul Andrews. How to Analyze People on Sight Through the Science of Human Analysis. The 5 Human Types by Elsie Lincoln Benedict and Ralph Paine Benedict. Section 2 of Chapter 3. Seldom unemployed. For this reason, the Muscular is seldom out of work. He's in demand at the best current wages because he can be depended upon to keep at it. While writing this book, our windows overlooked a public park in one of America's 1 million population cities. Hundreds of unemployed men sleep there day and night. Having occasion to pass through this park daily for several months, it's been interesting to note the types predominating. Hardly 1% belong to the Muscular type. Likes to do things. Because he is such a hard worker, this type gets a good deal of praise and glory, just as the fat people who manage to get out of work receive a good deal of blame. Yet work is almost as pleasant to the Muscular as leisure is to the Alimentive. The Muscular's pugnacity. Fighters, those who really enjoy a scrap occasionally, are invariably Musculars. Their square jaws, the sure sign of a great muscularity, are famous the world over, and especially so in these days when war is once more in fashion. The next time you look at the front faces of Pershing, Haig, Hindenburg, or even that of your traffic policeman, note the extremely muscular face and jaw. Combat or personal fighting is a matter of muscle action. Being well equipped for it, this type actually enjoys it. That is why he is oftener in trouble than any other type. It was no accident that the phrase "big stick" was the slogan of an almost pure Muscular. Loves the strenuous life. The strenuous life was another of Roosevelt's pet phrases and came from the natural learnings of his type. The true Muscular is naturally strenuous. Because we are prone to advise others to do what we enjoy doing ourselves, it was inevitable that as strenuous a man as TR should advocate wholesale, universal, and almost compulsory strenuosity. We tell others to do such things because it will do you good, but the real reason usually is that we like to do it ourselves. The acrobatic type. The next time you go to a vaudeville show, get in there in time for the acrobatics and notice how all the participants are Musculars. If there are any other types taking part, please observe that they are secondary to the acrobats. They catch the handkerchiefs or otherwise act as foils for the real performers. All the hard work in the act will be done by the Musculars. You'll find no better examples of the short, stocky, well-knit, pure Muscular than here. You do not need to wait for another show to realize how true this is. Recall the form and height of all the acrobats you've ever seen. You will remember that there was not one who did not fit the description of a pure muscular given at the beginning of this chapter. Acrobats always muscular. We once had occasion to refer to this fact in a human analysis class. One member declared that just that week he had seen a very tall, unmuscular man performing in an acrobatic act at the Orpheum. Knowing that this was impossible, we offered a large reward to this member if he were proven right. We sent to the theatre and found the acrobat in question. He had just finished his act and kindly consented to come over. He turned out to be a pure muscular, as we had stated. The class member's mistake came from the fact that the acrobat appeared taller than he really was. High platforms always give this illusion. Furthermore, his partner in the act was of diminutive height, and the acrobat looked tall and slender by contrast. Why they don't do it. To be an acrobat is the ambition of almost every boy. There have been few who did not dream, while doing those stunts in the haymow on mother's broomsticks, of the glory that should be theirs when they grew up and performed in red tights for the multitudes. Almost every boy has this ambition because he passes through a stage of decided muscular development in his early years. But only those who are born with much larger muscles than the average ever carry out their dreams. The others soon develop girth or the sitting still habit to the point where a cushioned seat in the first row of the parquet looks much better. Durability in clothes. Something that will wear well is what this type asks for when he drops in to buy a suit. Musculars are not parsimonious nor stingy. Their buying the most durable in everything is not so much to save money as for the purpose of having something they do not need to be afraid to handle. Likes heavy materials. This type likes heavy, stable materials. Whereas the alimentive wants comfortable clothes and the thoracic distinctive ones, the muscular wants wearable, everyday clothes. He wants the materials to be of the best, but he cares less for color than the thoracic. Quality, rather than style, and plainness, rather than prettiness, are his standards in dress. Making over father's pants for Johnny is a job muscular women have excelled in, and for which they have become famous. For this type of mother not only sees to it that her father's pants are of the kind of stuff that won't wear out easily, but she has the square, creative hand that enjoys the construction. The plain dresser. Simple dresses, blue serge for instance, are the one the muscular woman likes. This type cares little about clothes as ornamentation. He is intent on getting his desires satisfied by doing things, not by looking at them. He also resents the time and trouble that fashionable dressing demands. No matter how much money this type has, he will not be inclined to extremes in dress. Musculars are not really interested in clothes for clothes' sake. It is not that this type is unambitious, he's extremely so, but he's so concentrated on getting things done that he's likely to forget how he looks while he's doing them. When a person of this type does take great pains with his clothes, it is always for a purpose, and not because he enjoys preening himself. There is little of the peacock in the muscular. A simple soul. Musculars are the most democratic of all types. The thoracic is a natural aristocrat and enjoys the feeling of a little innocent superiority, but musculars often refuse to take advantage of superior positions gained through wealth or station, and are inclined to treat everybody as an equal. It is almost impossible for this type, even though he may have become or may have been born a millionaire, to lord it over servants or subordinates. He is given to backing democratic movements of all kinds, and that explains why musculars constitute the large majority in every radical group. Humanness his hobby. Being human is an ideal to which this type adheres with an almost religious zeal. He likes the commonplace things and is never a follower after the thing, though he has no prejudices against it, as the fourth type has. An everyday individual. The muscular does not care for show, and except when essential to the success of his aims, seldom does anything for appearances. He's not an easygoing companion like the alimentive, nor a scintillating one like the thoracic, but an everyday sort of person. When in trouble. This type is not given to sliding out of difficulties like the alimentive, nor to being temporarily submerged by them like the thoracic. He stands up to them and backs them down. When in trouble, he acts instead of merely thinking. The most practical type. The practicalist is often used to describe this type. He is inclined to look at everything from the standpoint of its practicality, and is neither stingy nor extravagant. He likes what works. Will it work, is the question this type puts to everything. If it won't, though it be the most fascinating or the most diverting thing in the world, he will take little interest in it. This type depends mostly upon his own hands and his head to make his fortune for him, and is seldom lured into risking money on things he hasn't seen. The natural efficiency expert. The shortest, surest way is the one this type likes. He's not inclined to fussiness. He insists on things being done in the most efficient way, and he usually does them that way himself. He's not an easy man to work for, but quick to reward merit. The muscular does not necessarily demand money nor the things that money buys, but he tries to get the workable out of life. The property owner. This type likes to have a fair bank account and to give his children a worthwhile training. He's less inclined to bedeck them with frills, but he will plan years ahead for their education. These are not rigid parents like the fourth type, or lenient like the alimentives, nor temperamental with their children like the thoracics, but practical and very efficient in their parenthood. They're fond of their children, but they don't spoil them as often as some of the other types do. They bring up their children to work and teach them early in life how to do things. As a result, the children of this type become useful at an early age and usually know how to earn a living if necessary. Wants the necessities. The necessities of life are things this type demands and gets. Whereas the alimentive demands the comforts and the thoracic the unusual, the muscular demands essentials. He's willing to work for them, so he usually succeeds. He's not given to rating frills and fripperies as necessities, but demands the things everyday men or women need for everyday existence. Naturally, he goes after them with the same force he displayed in everything else. His heart and soul in things. When someone shows great intensity of action directed towards a definitive end, we often say, he puts his heart and soul into it. This phrase is apropos of almost everything the muscular does. He makes no half-hearted attempts. An enthusiast. Enthusiasm does all things, said Emerson, and therein explain why this type accomplishes so much. The reason back of the muscular's enthusiasm is interesting. All emotions powerfully affect muscles. A sad thought flits through your mind and instantly the muscles of your face droop and the corners of your mouth go down. Hundreds of similar illustrations with which you are already familiar serve to prove how close is the connection between emotions and muscles. The heart itself is nothing more nor less than a large, tough, leather-like muscle. Possessing the best equipment for expressing emotion, the muscular is constantly and automatically using it. Therefore, he becomes an enthusiast over many things during the course of his lifetime. This enthusiasm literally burns his way to the things he wants. The plain talker. When deeply moved, this type talks well. If the mental element is also strong, he can become a good public speaker, for he will then have all the qualifications: a powerful voice, human sympathy, democracy, and simplicity. In private conversation, he's inclined to use the verbal hammers too much, and to be too drastic in his statements, accusations, etc. But he means what he tells you, no more, and usually not much less. He avoids long words and complicated phrases, even when well educated, and speaks them with directness and decisiveness. Straightforward. Straight from the shoulder might be used to describe the method of the pure muscular in what he does and says. He does not deal in furbelows, dislikes the superfluous and the superficial. He goes through life over the shortest roads. Likes the common people. Plain folks like himself are the kind this type prefers for friends. He enjoys them immensely, but does not cultivate as large number of them as does the thoracic, nor have as many bowing acquaintances as the alimentive. Snubs the snobs. The snob is disliked by everyone, but is the especial aversion of this type. Being so democratic himself and living his life among such commonplace lines, he has no patience with people who imagine they are better than others or carry the air of superiority. The only person, therefore, whom the muscular is inclined to snub is the snob. He is not overawed by him and enjoys taking him down a peg whenever he tries his high and mighty airs on him. Defends the underdog. Standing by the underdog is a kind of religion with this type. He glories in fighting for the downtrodden. This explains why he is so often a radical. Much of this vehemence in radicalism is due to the fact that he feels he is getting even with the snobs of the world, the plutocrats, when he furthers the causes of the proletariat. Often the warpath. To have it out with you is the first inclination of when this type becomes angry. He's apt to say atrocious things and to exaggerate his grievances. Everything must yield to his dander once it is up. Being possessed of a highly developed fighting equipment, he's like a battleship, with every gun in place most of the time. He is frequently in violent quarrels with his friends, and since he doesn't recover from his anger quickly like the thoracic, he often loses them for life. The most generous friend. When they like you, the musculars are the most abandoned in their generosity of all the types. They go the limit for you, as the Westerner says, and they go it with their money, time, love, and enthusiasm. All types do this for short periods occasionally, and for a very few choice friends, but the muscular often does it for the people he scarcely knows if they strike his fancy or appeal to him. His heart and his home belong to the stranger almost as completely as to his family, for he doesn't feel a stranger to anyone. He feels from the first moment and acts as though he'd known you always. This accounts for his democracy, for his success as an orator, and sometimes for his being broke. Not a quick forgiver. But disappoint him in anything he considers vital, and he does not overlook it easily. He finds it especially difficult to forgive people who take advantage of the generosity he so lavishly extends. But he doesn't make his hate a lifelong one as the fourth type does. With all his own giving to others, he seldom takes much from others. The naturally independent. Standing on his own legs is a well-known trait of the muscular. Dependence is bred of necessity. This type, being able to get for himself most of the things he wants, rarely finds it necessary to call upon others for assistance. Love of self-government, plus fighting pluck, both of which are inherent in the muscular Irish race, are responsible for their long struggle of independence. Likes plain foods. Meat and potatoes are the favorite diet of the average American muscular. The alimentive wants richness and sweetness in food. The thoracic wants variety and daintiness, but the muscular wants large quantities of plain food. The alimentive specializes in desserts, the thoracic in unusual dishes, but the muscular wants solid fare. He's so fond of meat it's practically impossible for him to confine himself to a vegetable diet. When he is in moderate circumstances. The muscular is often found in moderate circumstances. He's rarely far below or far above them. Many of the plain, simple, everyday things he desires can be secured by people of average means. He does not feel the necessity for becoming a millionaire to obtain comforts like the alimentive, nor for extravagances like the thoracic. When he is rich. Philanthropy marks the expenditures of this type whenever he is rich. He doesn't spend as much money for possessions, but enjoys investing in what he deems the real, that is, other human beings. The most plain and durable things in furnishings, architecture, and service characterize the rich of this type in their homes. The world's work done by musculars. Broadly speaking, the fat man manages the world. The florid man entertains the world, and the muscular man does the work of the world. He composes most of the day laborers, the middlemen, the manual and mechanical toilers the world around, as we have stated before. He could get out of hard places into better paid ones if he did not like activity so well, but lacking the love of ease and show he is willing to work hard for the necessities of life. Simple habits. The muscular's nature does not demand the exciting, the gregarious, or the food and drink things that lead towards laxity. He is seldom a dissipator. He likes to go to bed early, work hard, and make practical progress in his life. He leads the simple and yet the most strenuous existence of any type. Entertainment he enjoys. Plays about plain people, their everyday experiences, hopes and fears are the kind that interest this type most. The problem play of a decade ago was a prime favorite with him. He likes everything dealing with his everyday commonplace affairs for which he is most familiar. He frequently goes to serious lectures, something the pure alimentive always avoids, and he especially enjoys them if they deal with the problem of the here and now. He cares little for comic opera, vaudeville, or reviews, because he feels they serve no practical purpose and get him nowhere. This type does not attend the theatre merely to be amused. He goes for light on his everyday experiences, and usually considers time wasted that is spent solely on entertainment. Music he likes. Band music, stirring tunes, and all music with go to it appeals to this type. Reading. True stories, news, and the sports page are the favorite newspaper reading of the muscular. He does not take to sentimental stories as much as the alimentive, nor to adventure so much as the thoracic, but sticks to practical subjects almost exclusively. Being active most of his waking hours, and strenuously active at that, the muscular is often too tired at night to read anything. His favorite sports. The most violent sports are popular with this type. Football, baseball, handball, tennis, rowing and pugilism are his preferences. All experts in these lines are largely muscular. Physical assets. His wonderful muscular development, upon which depends so much of life's happiness, since accomplishment is measured so largely thereby, is the greatest physical asset of this type. With it, he can accomplish almost anything of which his mind can conceive. He is capable of endless effort, does not tire easily, and because his directness makes his work count to the utmost of his mental capacity. Physical liabilities. A tendency to overwork is the chief physical pitfall of this type. The disease to which he is most susceptible is rheumatism, but owing to his love of activity he exercises more than any other type, and thus forestalls many diseases. Social assets. His generosity is the strongest social asset of the muscular. He is usually straightforward and sincere, and thereby gains the confidence of those who meet him. Social liabilities. His loud voice and plain ways are the disadvantages under which this type labors in social intercourse. He needs polishing and is not inclined to take it. His pugnacity is also a severe drawback. Emotional assets. Understanding, enthusiasm and warmth of heart are the emotional qualities which help make him the public leader he so often is. These have made him the born orator, the radical, and the reformer of all ages. Emotional liabilities. His tendency to anger and combat the shackles that seriously handicap him. Many times these lose him the big opportunities which his splendid traits might obtain for him. Business assets. Efficiency and willingness to work hard and long are the greatest business assets of this type. Business liabilities. Pugnacity over trifles costs the average muscular many business chances. He has to fight out every issue, and while he's doing it, the other fellow closes the deal. He's inclined to argue at great length. This helps him as a lawyer or speaker, but it hurts him in business. Curbing his combativeness in business should be one of his chief aims. Domestic strength. Practical protection for the future is the greatest gift of the average muscular to his family. He's not as lenient with his children as the alimentive, nor as effusive as the thoracic, but he usually lays something by for their future. Domestic weakness. Cruel, angry words do the muscular much harm in his family life. They cause his nearest and dearest to hold against him the resentments that follow. Should aim at. Taking more frequent vacations, relaxing each day and curbing his pugnacity should be the special aims of this type. Should avoid. Superficial and quarrelsome people, all situations requiring pretense and everything that confines and restricts his physical activity should be avoided by this type. Strongest points. Democracy, industry, and great physical strength are the strongest points of this type. Weakest points. Inclination to overwork and to fight constitute the muscular's two weakest links. How to deal with this type socially. Don't put on airs nor expect him to when you are meeting this type socially. Be straightforward and genuine with him if you would win him. How to deal with this type in business. Remember, this type is inclined to be efficient and democratic, and you'd better be the same if you wish to succeed in business with him. He's intensely resentful of the man who tries to put anything over on him and demands efficiency. So when you promise him a thing, see to it that you deliver the goods and for the price stated. He does not mind paying a good price if he knows it in the beginning, but beware of raising it afterwards. The muscular is serious in business, not a jollier like the alimentive, nor a thriller like the thoracic, and he wants you to be the same. Remember, the chief distinguishing marks of the muscular, in the order of their importance, are large, firm muscles, a square jaw, and square hands. Any person who has these is largely of the muscular type, no matter what other types may be included in his makeup. End of section 2 of chapter 3.